Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Monday again, everyone, and welcome to Richard Skipper Celebrates. I, of course, am Richard Skipper, and I'm all about celebrating artists and their body of worth. For those of you who are just tuning in, sorry about the delay today, but I was talking away, introducing our guest, and then I realized that my microphone was muted through the entire opening introduction. And I felt that our guest today, Renee Katz, deserves better than this. So I decided, rather than continuing to go forward, that I would scrap that show and start all over. And here we are. Today, I am very excited to celebrate Renee Katz. She is a friend of mine. I have this book, by the way, of hers, Never Been Gone by Renee Katz. A lot of you who are tuning in, I'm seeing some of the people that are here, know her as a cabaret entertainer. For those of you who do not know her, she's been compared to a young Barbara Cook. She's also an amazing writer. She's an amazing poet. She is an amazing person. And she also is an amazing friend. Now, I brought her on screen, but I'm going back. Renee, you gave this book to me in 2018. And you inscribed in the book, and I love you for this. Thank you for all your advocacy of new artists and contributions to the cabaret community. Thank you for being part of my journey. And I want to thank you for being part of my journey. And there's a passage here that I would like to read at the very beginning of the book. It says, and this is about her, she has not spent the past 33 years being a victim. Far from it. Right at the start, a nurse at Bellevue told her, you have 5 minutes out of every day to feel sorry for yourself. The rest of the time, you've got to get up and do something. And I think now, more than any other time in our lives, that message is ringing true. And before we delve into your story, first of all, thank you for being here. And I want to ask you, how are you doing really in the midst of this crazy new world that we find ourselves in?
Well, I am hanging in, and I am trying to keep myself busy on doing the things that I love and doing some things that I haven't had a chance to do in a while. I actually haven't written poetry in a while because I've been really focused on my cabaret singing, and I have joined several groups and gotten back into poetry, and that feels good as well. So I'm doing both, and I'm trying to stay positive.
Well, I love the fact that you're keeping creative. You, of course, are with your wonderful husband. And does your father live above you or below you in the same house?
My father just turned 95. He's 10 years older than my mom, and they live about 10 minutes from here. They're still together in their own home, and we make sure of that. So we're there quite a bit.
Now, if you can speak a little bit more into the microphone, because you are coming across, and speak out, project, think that you're on stage tonight at the Cabaret convention.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about your parents. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who your mom and dad are, describing their authentic selves as to, who they are?
Well, I have two poems about my parents in the book. My mom was born with a hearing deficit, a very bad one. But despite that, she got through college, and she was a bookkeeper and then a housewife, and she had me and my brother. So she is a survivor in her own right. And then my father's very complex. My father is a Holocaust survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And he has persevered and made a whole life here in America. In fact, he's a very patriotic person.
Mm-hmm.
And he started out with nothing, a pair of skis from Sweden.
How
And
old was your father when he came to the United States, and how did he come to the United States?
well, he was liberated from Bergen-Belsen and was picked up by the Red Cross in
And again, speak out a little bit louder because this won't pick up. I know you got a soft voice, but project today.
Okay.
Great, that's better.
So so he did the Death March, and there's a story about my father and his shoes. Uh, I'm not going to get into it, but anyway, he was picked up. He after that he was liberated from Bergen-Belsen and picked up by the Red Cross and went to an internment camp in Sweden, and
Hmm.
they rehabilitated him back. He stayed in Sweden 7 years before he came to America. Um,
And how did he get to America?
on the Gripsholm, that's the name of the ship, and he went through
Mhm.
Ellis Island, and he stayed with my aunt. He didn't know that his brother was alive. There was one brother out of a family of he had five. There was 5 children in the family, so the parents were killed, and the 3 children, the 3 younger children. And he didn't know his brother was alive. His older brother was alive, but he was, and they met in America.
Wow,
And
that's an
it was a
amazing
very
story.
joyous day. Yes, yeah.
And how did your parents meet?
They met in a dance. They met in a dance in Manhattan, and I think they went to Automat afterwards or something like that.
Oh, I missed the Automat. The Automat was still there here in New York when I came to New York. And so I got a chance, 1979. I think that was the last year of the Automat or somewhere around then. So I love the Automat.
Yes. So they went. They met in a dance.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother.
Okay.
His name is Bob Katz. He's a singer-songwriter.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, what kind of music did you listen to growing up? Because the world of cabaret and the standards and everything is something that came much later in your life, and we're going to get there eventually. But what kind of music do you remember listening to? Let's go back to the 5-year-old Renee Katz and the kind of music that you were listening to around the house.
Well, we did. I did a lot of Julie Andrews things. So we were doing The Sound of Music and all of her material, and Streisand and Beatles eventually, Carly Simon, Carole King. Um, yeah, those were the people I grew up with.
And I know that you started out as a flautist, and I want to talk about that as well. At what point did you start taking lessons to be a flautist?
Well, I actually started on piano and ballet at
Mhm.
5. I wanted to be a dancer, actually. I wanted to be a ballerina. Um, so I studied dancing for a very long time with piano. I picked up flute in junior high school, um, and had just started with that. When I auditioned for LaGuardia School of the Arts, Music and Art, it was on piano that I got in on.
Mhm.
Um, I did not make the dance department at Performing Arts, so I played piano and I got in on piano. And then they put me in the flute department because there was no piano major. Can you believe it?
Wow.
And I
Wow.
focused on flute, and I was always in the chorus. I sang also, and I worked my way up the orchestras.
Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, unless, of course, you do. But when you were 17, a tragic situation happened. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where you want to go with that? And then we'll move on, to your life and career beyond that.
Okay. Um, so when I lived in Queens, so to get to Music and Art High School, which was up in Harlem, I took 2 buses and 3 trains. I usually took it with people, but sometimes I overslept and I went on my own. This was one of those mornings. It was finals. We had a test on King Lear. I was studying. I fell asleep in the train. I missed my stop. And then I waited for the next train. And somebody on the platform pushed me from behind onto the tracks. I instinctively moved to rolled to the left while the train was going over me and
Oh my God.
I saved my own life, except for my hand. And my hand was injured very badly in this accident. And it was actually severed, and there was two ambulances because it was a very new type of surgery that they were going to attempt, which was microsurgery. And, I went I went to Bellevue Hospital, and they did this marathon operation because I was young, because I was a flute player and a piano player, and because my parents were survivors. The media was all over it.
Well, that's what I remember. Long before I knew who you were personally, I knew of this story, and I knew because I saw it in the papers. I remember, if I remember correctly, pictures of you dancing the night away at Studio 54.
Well, that was the surreal part,
Right.
So, yeah. So I had lots of surgeries. I had a guard in front of my room at Bellevue Hospital. Um, I want to say that I continued singing in the hospital. I would take my casted arm and get up and go next door. And, I found some other musicians in the hospital. Because I was there about 6 weeks. So
Wow.
I didn't stop. And that helped. That helped. My voice teacher came in and we worked.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Now, one of the things that I want to point out about you that I find so incredible, and it speaks to your soul and who you are, is that you have no anger towards the person who did this, and that you don't focus on that aspect of your life. It was a bump in the road, but you pulled yourself together and you continue to move on. What do you feel deep down inside, Renee, was what got you through this entire period? Beyond the support, the massive support that everybody was rooting for you.
I think that having a survivor as a father really helped because I thought if he would get through it, I could. But the downside of that is that I did get through it, and I did go back to school, and I continued, and I smiled, and I did everything, but I never really got a chance to grieve, you know, and that caught up with me later. But
Mm-hmm.
but having a father like that who is very strong and doesn't show much emotion um, helped me till my first divorce, which is when I grieved, which is many years later. And that's when I started writing. And that's when I started reading poems like
So
Rumi.
you had not really done any writing prior to you getting this divorce. And do you think that was it?
I wrote some in the hospital,
Okay.
but the majority of my writing started as a process of grieving. And that was later. That was later. And it's interesting because the media um, has positives and negatives. And one of the negatives was I had to be on all the time. And um, later on,
Do you feel that you were harassed by the media at that time as well?
my, we were, I
And
remember
again, remember to speak into the
President brushing
microphone.
his face against my parents'
Mm-hmm.
house. I remember when John Lennon died, I was in the papers at the same time because my trial was that time. And I remember, covering myself up so I wouldn't be seen. We walked
Just
all
to
the
remind you, Renee, to speak into the mic and to speak up.
we walked all the way up we went from NYU up to John Lennon, and we had a candle. And I remember that time. But the media is positives and negatives.
And through this entire period that you were going through, Renee, were you thinking about your art and the creativity side of your brain and where you were working? And did you have goals and aspirations to get back on the stage after this all happened?
Well, that's who I am. When I went to music and art, that's who I am. You can't take that away from a person.
Right.
You know, somebody can try and take that away from you. But getting back to your original thing about anger, it doesn't serve any use. Because if you remain bitter, you're playing into the hands of the people that tried to hurt you.
That's right.
And that does not make any sense to me. So I'm not going to let him or her have that, you know, power.
Well, I love what Jane Fonda says. She says there needs to be a statute of limitations as to how long you hold on to the anger. And I'm talking about any anger that we have towards anyone in our lives. And how long after this incident in your life, you were 17 at the time, how long after that did you get back on the boards and start performing again?
Well, I went to NYU. So I was performing at NYU. That's where I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was in New York Choral Society, and then I did some musical theater in between all that. So yeah, when I was in college, you know, and I had rehabilitation from my hand. I had a full caseload at school. I would, during the summers, take courses. I was very motivated.
And
kept on going.
And again, as I said at the beginning of this program, many people who are watching know you essentially from the cabaret world. How did that begin for you?
Well, during college, I think it was probably Laurie Beachman I saw one night, and I was just hooked. Every time I had a minute, I would go see her. I went to see Blossom Dearie. I went all these places, and that was my thing, to go at night and to pick up repertoire. And, that's when I started really getting into cabaret and working with musical directors and on arrangements. And
let's go back to the first one. Who was your first musical director that you worked with? Who was your first director? What was the first room you performed in? I want you to take us back to that and what the experience of that night was like for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. He was from Macon, Georgia, my very first musical director. And he had specialized in doing George Gershwin. And I'm sorry, his name is not on the tip of my tongue. But that was the very first person that I worked with. I worked with David Lewis as well.
Oh, I love David.
Yes, so we worked a while, and again, on arrangements. And I would collect I have a lot of beautiful arrangements because I have so much material from so many years. So,
and how many years ago?
It was Panache. I did Panache 1, I did Panache 2. Don't Tell Mamas. I did Irv Rabel's 88s, which I loved. Yeah, and loved Don't Tell Mamas. So, yeah, long time.
And what are your memories of that first night that you appeared on stage in a cabaret room, living your dream?
Well, it was fantastic. I remember, Sydney was there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Sydney does the same thing now that he did way back then, which is hold my hands. He's there every opening night and most every show.
I'll say this I've said this before and I'll say it again about Sydney. What I admire so much about him, and I made my cabaret debut at Don't Tell Mama as well. And that was in the early 90s, so back a while ago. But the thing about Sydney, and I don't know how he does it, but if you're booked at that venue, he's there for your opening night. And I can't say that for any other booking agent in New York City.
Yeah, he's very special.
And so how many cabaret shows have you done over the years?
I never counted, but
Well, let's talk about the process then. What is the process when you decide to do a show?
The process is usually it's based on a theme that runs through. It may be very subtle. It may be a theme just to me,
Mm-hmm.
but it all kind of connects. So, sometimes the material that I find excites me, and I try and find a connection between all of it. But usually, it's based on an inner life that's not out there. It's not in your face, but it's a journey. It's a journey. Sometimes I connect poetry with my shows. I didn't do that when I was started out, um, but basically that's it. I make sure that there's a connection
Mm-hmm.
and a
Mm-hmm.
build, um, and that's my process.
So, I mean, obviously, as you just said, you don't know how many shows you've done, but you've been doing shows over the
At least
years.
15, at
Okay.
least 20.
And, but what are, I mean, have you ever worked on an idea in terms of creating a show? And as you're putting the show together, you think it's the greatest idea in the world, but halfway to getting there, you change courses completely because you realize perhaps this wasn't the idea that I thought it was, or anything. There's sirens going by, so I'm sure you hear that. But, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you faced in terms of putting shows together?
Well, it could be, I've worked with my most recent director is Jeff Harner, and everybody works different things
Mm-hmm.
together. And I've also tried to do it myself, but it's best with a director. And I've worked with Peter Schlosser, um, but to make everything fit requires adaptability, and it requires sometimes you need to put a different song there, or it needs to switch around. You know, definitely to get that right message across.
Mm-hmm. And, I know that this particular week is the Cabaret convention in New York. So kudos to everybody involved tonight.
Yes,
Um,
great.
Now, are you performing tonight? Are you
No,
performing this
no,
week?
no, I'm not in this one. I was in 2018.
Then I'm not watching.
It
No,
was
I'm kidding. I'm
really
kidding.
exciting.
So I want to go back to that.
I
I
was
mean, when
I
you
was in the
first got,
Jerry Herman night.
no, you did Jerry Herman and
Yeah,
you sang Ribbons Down My Back.
I did.
And one of my favorite, well, Jerry Herman is my favorite composer, other than Michael Colby, another favorite composer. And Michael Colby tonight, everyone who's watching at 7:00, he's going to be on the Jim Masters show. And you were on Jim Masters show a few weeks ago.
I was.
So what, I mean, when, where, and how did you find out that you were going to be part of the Cabaret convention?
Well, KT came to see me perform.
KT Sullivan, for those who don't know.
Yes, KT Sullivan, and she's extremely supportive. And she came to see me several times. And after that, she asked me. It was very thrilling.
And did she ask you to sing this particular song, or did you have the freedom to choose what you wanted to sing?
I sang on my back from her for her at her apartment in one of her soirees after one of her shows.
Mhm.
And I went to the piano and I sang that, and that's how she heard it.
And it's funny because today I was listening to my device. I'm not going to mention her name because she'll start talking back to me. And I said, ... play Renee Katz. And I was listening to your music all this afternoon because you also have a wonderful CD. And, but one of the songs that came up today was Ribbons Down My Back. What was that experience like for you performing that evening?
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was so exciting. The stage was bigger than any stage I had ever sung on, besides when I auditioned for Phantom.
Well, what was that experience like?
Oh, it was great. I got a call back.
Oh, good for you.
I didn't get the part. But anyway, that
You got the call back. That's the important thing.
yes. So yeah. So and just to be with my peers and everybody was so wonderful. It was just extremely exciting, and an evening I will never forget.
Now, the last show that I saw you do, uh, last year, I think it was, right now, all the years and the dates and everything run together in my head. But this was your celebration of the music of Julie Stein. Great, great show. John Cook, musical director, Jeff Harner, director. Um, how did how did you come up with the idea of doing a show celebrating Julie Stein? I'm a huge Julie Stein fan, so that was exciting to be there to see the show.
Yeah, actually, Michael Colby. You were talking about Michael Colby. He's a wonderful lyricist and friend of mine. And I'm really a musical historian. And I was going over some of my repertoire with him, and we were thinking about ideas, different ideas. And Julie Stein came up, and I loved so much of his music. And I read his biography, and I did a lot of work. I even talked with you about,
I know.
some of my stuff. So it just seemed like the thing to do and the time to do it.
And how did you and John Cook come together to work together?
I belong to the Oratorio Society of Queens,
Mm-hmm.
and the conductor recommended John Cook for me, and that's exactly how we met.
Now, I understand that because of COVID and the restrictions and everything, you haven't seen John in quite some time. Is that right?
I haven't seen John since March 4th.
Wow.
We were going to perform at the Beach Cafe. We were going to do the Julie Stein show, and that was canceled. And shortly, that's when we stopped seeing one another. But we have been persevering and trying to learn technology.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, we were on Facebook Live for many, many months with the latency and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we still got work accomplished because I'm working on a new show of New York City songwriters. Because people send me material, and it's very exciting to learn original stuff, and that's what we've been doing. And just recently, we have learned how to use Jam Kazam thanks to Matt Berman.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been working together 3 times already on Jam Kazam, and the latency is really tiny, and it's opened up a world of hearing everything. But there are things without the Jam Kazam, if you can't hear everything, you have to rely on your ear, singing a cappella almost, and it really makes you learn the music. It's not such a terrible thing, trying to find the positives in working. But right now we're doing Jam Kazam, and thrilling that he is actually here today for the first time.
Yes, we're gonna get. I mean, everybody. Renee is going to be singing live today on the show, so I'm excited about that as well. But what was your schedule like when COVID hit? I know that you said that you were scheduled to do your show at the beach, but were there other things that were in the offing when that happened?
No, that was the main show that we were doing, and I had started looking at the songwriter show as well, but that was the main thing we were doing, as I can remember.
Well, I want to let everybody know that John is waiting in the wings, and I am actually going to leave the screen for a moment so that you and John can do a number for everyone. And then we're going to come back and we'll continue with the rest of the interview. And if anyone has any questions or comments or suggestions, just post them here and we will get them to you as well. And we may even bring... So I will be back in a few. Everyone, Renee Katz and John Cook, for the first time since the pandemic began.
Say hi, John.
when we have learned. I pray someday we may yet live to live and let's live. Someday life will be rarer, need will be fairer, greed will not pay. Godspeed, a time of peace and grace on its way. Let it come someday. Someday our fight will be won then. We'll stand in the sun then, that bright afternoon. Till then, on days when the sun is gone, we'll hang on, wish upon the moon. Change will come one day, someday soon.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. They've never done that song before. They've never rehearsed that song before. They just so wow, how does it feel to be singing again like this?
Oh, it's amazing to have John here.
Now I need to get you back on camera.
So there he is. All right, hold on.
Yes, and remember again, once again, to sing.
I'm covered in wires.
Oh, well, one of the things that I've been saying, since doing this is that we have such an appreciation for the tech guys now, more so than we probably have ever had before. Those of us who are doing this because of the lighting and the sounds and, making sure that the camera is angled right and that we're doing the right thing.
Little webcam instead of your face over here.
I know. Like I said, don't look at me, look into the camera. So what has been the most difficult aspect in terms of the technical aspect of this that you've had to learn? And what do you find that you are the most proficient at since the pandemic began?
Well, I am not a technological person. But, I have made it my mission to read up, and I took David Sabella's class, and I have tried to take notes on it, and I'm trying.
But I think you're succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, just before, 2 hours before you came, there was a wire that I had to connect into my amp, which is an old amp. I've had it for a really long time, and it's working. And I had it here. I used to use it when I did, wedding bands and things. But it still works. And we got our interface, and I got some instruction from Matt, and that made the difference. And there's still a lot to learn, because I have a goal of doing a living room concert, and I was asked to do.
Now I know that you mentioned earlier that you
and all these things, so I want to learn how to do it well.
You are working on creating a show celebrating the songwriters that you know personally.
Yeah, it's more of a contemporary show.
Now, is that something that you're creating as a virtual show, or are you doing this with the hope that we'll be back on the boards very soon?
Probably both, but it'll be a virtual show first.
And I know that you've been very, very careful. You and I have not seen each other as much as I would love to.
I've been very careful, mostly in honor of everybody and in honor of my parents, who I see a lot. And then I have a son, and
Now, is your son at home?
he is.
And how is he
A lot
dealing?
of
I know that he's in
colleges are work
college.
from
And
home.
how is he dealing? Is he actually going to school, or is he working virtually?
He's doing a hybrid. He's doing a hybrid, and um, there's only like 10 kids in the class. They space them. They change the filters in the building. So he only goes once a week for 2 classes back to back, and the rest are online. So it's a hybrid.
And has it been an easy adjustment for him, or is he struggling like the rest of us are with everything?
It's very hard for young people, young adults to be home. They want to go out and work. And he worked for the census for a while, but that job has come to a close.
Mhm.
And just, he just graduated college. He's in grad school right now, just started. And it's not easy. They want to go out and they want to socialize, they want to do this. And he's been really, really responsible.
And
He visits my parents too.
how are they adjusting to it? I mean, they're older, and here you are in the middle, and then you've got your son on the other end of the spectrum. So how is that all working?
It's very hard for I think, elderly people. They don't understand why their daughter and their sons have to come in with masks, or they can't eat at the same table nearby. It's very hard for them, but I think they're finally getting used to it, unfortunately.
And your parents, do they have someone who lives with them, or are they solely on their own right now?
My mother is more disabled than my father. She has very bad arthritis, and she requires help. So there is somebody there.
And what do you do in terms of keeping your creativity going? Do you have a structure to your days, or do you do things as you feel the urge to do them? How are you managing
No, I have structure
personally?
to my days. I have times when I practice. I have times when I'm getting together with John. I have lots of poetry groups that I go to every week. Some of them are process poetry. So you start a poem and then you work on it during the week and then say it the next week in groups, within the Zoom group. Um, I try and do some of the piano bars. As I said, I'm going to be on Piano Bar Live once I figure out the technology. I'm very close to
Well, what you just did was perfect. So bring John
yeah,
back.
I think, yeah, if John comes over, then that will work. Yes. Other than that, the track thing was more complicated, but because
Well, we mentioned earlier your book, Never Been Gone. Um, how did you come up with the title for the book?
well, throughout, I love this song "Never Been Gone." First of all, by Carly Simon. It's the first song on my album. There's an album actually in that book on the back cover.
Yes,
So
I
the
have the
album,
album.
which I did with Christopher Marlowe, the messages of the songs are parallel to the messages in the poetry. So, Never Been Gone is just, I may have been out of the picture from the events that happened in my life, but I feel like my heart and soul has never been gone and never too far away from my creative process.
And writing the book, I know that a lot of the book, I mean, the first part of the book is autobiographical,
Mhm.
and then you've got these incredible poems that you have written. Um, were these poems that had been written prior, or were they poems that were written specific for the book?
No, they were written prior, and then I put all of them together, and then some of them I wrote for the journey of the book. Like the poem at the end about my dad, saying that evil will never win, and
Hmm.
the importance of vulnerability. So that's what I have learned through my dad, is that I don't want to be numb. I want to be able to feel, and I'm going to feel for the both of us.
Now,
So,
do you have a favorite poem that stands out above all the others?
well, a lot of them are different, but I love the poem about my father, but it's extremely intense and long.
Mm-hmm.
I like the poem about vulnerability. I like that poem a lot. I like Wildflowers and Daisy Wishes. Um, those are the ones I like the most.
Now, do you have a favorite poet that you aspire to be like, or is there anyone whose style, or you've created your own style in terms of your own writing?
I never studied writing poetry. I just do it. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to study it more, but that's why I'm in these groups. I'm learning from these amazing poets,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been encouraged by a lot of good friends to keep at it. And it's almost as exciting to create a poem as it is when you're singing on stage. But nothing is as thrilling as when you're singing on stage, to me.
Now, I began the interview by asking you about the kind of music that you listen to. You mentioned Julie Andrews. Who are some of the singers performing today that inspire you?
Well, I love, I do love Barbara Cook. I know she passed, but I love Victoria Clark. I love people that can really phrase well. So when I listen to artists, I listen to Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald, and I loved Nancy Lamott, um, Marnie Nixon, um, Lena Horne. I mean, they have really interesting phrasing. So,
And
Gloria Beachman.
and I'm going to ask you, I mean, would you be interested in doing another song for us?
Wow. Oh, Keith?
I know I put you on the spot with that one.
Yes. He's probably going to do it by heart.
Well, that's the best way to do it. Once again, everyone, Renee Katz and John Cook.
That was tricky, Richard.
I know he's around when the sky and the ground starting ringing. I know that he's near by the thunder I hear in advance. His words alone are the words that can start my heart singing. 'Cause his is the only music that makes me dance. He'll sleep and he'll rise in the light of two eyes that adore him. Bore him it might, though he won't leave my sight. For a glance in every way, every day, I need less of myself, I need more him. 'Cause his is the only music that makes me dance. Yes, his is the only
Well, Renee, you can't hear it, but everyone's applauding crazily for you. I love you so much. You're such an inspiration to myself and to so many people in the community. And I can't believe this, but we are at the end of our show today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope you all had a great time. And if you did, please go to my website, if you haven't done so already, and sign my guest book, richardskipper.com. With your thoughts about the show, because that helps to boost me in other markets. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. And I want to ask you, Renee, is it possible for people to still get your book and the CD?
Yeah, through Infinity Publishing. It was on Amazon. It's still on Amazon. And Infinity Publishing.
And if you can post the link on my page, then I'll be able to get the word out for everyone.
Okay.
So everyone, I want you to all go to your Facebook friends list. I want you to go to the first name that pops up, and I want you to order the book for yourself, and I want you to order the book for a friend. And that way we can get this book out to so many people. It's such an inspiring story. You're an inspiring person. Before we sign off, I'm sorry?
Thank you so much for having me on.
No, I'm thrilled that you were here. And before we sign off, I'd like to, I'm going to turn this stage over to you. Any message that you want to leave everyone with? Final words, anything that perhaps we didn't cover that you want to get the message out for today? Any message that you have for anyone who's out there? It could be about the times that we're living in. We want to encourage everybody, you and I are on the same page on this, to vote, vote, vote. Not 3 times, but vote. Whether it be absentee ballot,
someday,
early voting.
Change will come someday soon.
Yes, thank you. So I'm giving you the final word. Anything that you'd like to leave everyone with today?
I'd like to leave you with 2 things. One of the things that I try and live by is it's easy in the pandemic to concentrate on what we lost, because all of us have lost a lot, some more than others, and it's a really hard time. But if it is possible to concentrate on what you're lucky enough to keep, so don't concentrate on all that you've lost. Focus on what you are lucky enough to keep and have a sense of gratitude about it. And I'm going to leave you with a Rumi poem. So we all have a journey that we're taking, and we just have to trust in that journey that it's going to lead us to the right place, even though sometimes that's very hard to see. And when bad things happen, it's very hard to see right then and there what you're supposed to learn from it. But there is always something that you can learn from events, no matter what they are, how horrible they are, whatever they are. There is always a process to learn, but don't let fear capture you and paralyze you. So this is my Rumi poem that I love. Keep walking, though there's no place to get to. Don't try to see through the distances. Move within, but never move the way fear makes you move. And that's my Rumi.
I love you, Renee. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. I will be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. for a very special show celebrating movie palaces. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you. Until next time, keep thinking those good thoughts.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.